Guys, is the mic on? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all for being with us. I'm going to begin the service by chanting from the book of Psalms, Tehillim, and this is Psalm 23. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai ro'i lo yachsar, bino desheyar b'tzaini, Al-Malei menuchot yinahaleni, nafshi shovev yancheni b'maglei tzedek, למען שמו גמה כי ילך בגיא צל מוות לא ירא כי אתה עמדי שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי תשענת בשמך ראשי כוסי רוויה אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי V'shavti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. Psalm of David, Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want, giving me repose in green meadows, leading me beside the still waters to revive my spirit, guiding me on the right path, for that is God's essence. Though I walk through a valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod comfort me. You prepare a banquet for me in the presence of my foes. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness shall be my portion all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. We are here gathered today to pay our tribute of affection and respect to a dear friend, loved one, to a masterful teacher, to Miriam bat Reuven Vepesi, who has been taken from us. And Miriam was born on February 18th, 1932 in Poland, and I'll let Sharon try to pronounce the name of the location where she was born in a moment. Miriam was preceded in death by her parents, Reuven and Pessi, as well as her brother Mendy. And I want to offer our sincere condolences to her entire family, to her husband Philip, to her daughter Sharon and husband Howard, her grandchildren Matthew, Ryan, and Michael, to her sister-in-law Anne, and Anne's children Melanie and Chuck, and to her many close friends. And I should add, to her many students who adored her. At this time, I'd like to call on Sharon, who I may get in trouble, but I think if there is a model of what a child ought to do for parents as they age, Sharon, I have it based on a reliable source, Howard, that you have been nothing but outstanding, both in terms of the way you've been dealing with some of the issues with your mom, and of course with your dad's health situation as well. So without further ado.
Miriam Kirsch was born in Wysogrodek, Poland in February of 1932. Her parents and her older brother Mendy immigrated to Canada in 1937. They settled in what is now called Thunder Bay, Ontario. There is a picture that survives of her father's extended family, her grandfather, who is Chaim, her aunts Livsha and Mechia, their husbands and their children. None of them survived the Holocaust. Only Reuven's family, his brother Shim and his sister Pearl, escaped to Canada in time. Miriam's mother had several siblings who escaped Europe and settled in the United States. Having such a small family impacted on her family dynamics and required her to seek connections with extended family and friends. Miriam was a bright girl who loved to read. She attended Queen's University, excelling in her studies. She had dreams of becoming a lawyer, but her father discouraged her, and instead she pursued education. Miriam moved to Winnipeg, where she stayed with extended family. Her parents followed, and her brother Mendy moved to New York. Miriam completed her studies at the University of Manitoba, and in 1961, she was awarded the gold medal for highest standing in education. When she was fresh out of university, her first teaching job was at West Kildonan Collegiate. Her principal challenged her by assigning her to a room of teenage boys who tested her resolve, as she was only a few years older than them. Miriam was introduced to my father, Philip Maltz, and they married in 1957. Their first apartment was not far from here on Perth Avenue, just across the street from West Kildonan. They followed the trend of living close to her workplace by moving to a house on Arrowwood Drive, which was just around the corner from Miriam's next school, Garden City Collegiate. They eventually came full circle when they moved to River Ridge, just north of here, which was across the street from the new West Kildonan Collegiate. Miriam enjoyed her time at Garden City, where she taught English for many years, and where she became the department head. I was a student at Garden City, and it was interesting how my 5'2" mother was feared by the other students as she watched the hallway with an eagle eye. Some of you who attended with me probably remember that. She had the respect of her students and the student body and her colleagues. She maintained close friendships with many colleagues from Garden City, at least one of whom is here today. Teaching was my mother's passion. She was a hard worker, and I can remember her spending hours in the evening marking essays with her dreaded red pen. She was strict, and she pushed her students to do their best. She stayed in contact with many students over the years and considered some of them her dear friends. There have been many memories shared online by former students, and I'm grateful to all of you for your very kind words. During the 1980s, Miriam embarked on many challenges, including attending the University of Manitoba for further courses. In 1981, her academic pursuits took her to England, where she continued to attend courses. My father and I joined her, and we spent a memorable family holiday in London and the surrounding countryside. The trip to England was one of many family holidays. Other family trips included visits to New York and Florida to visit her brother, trips to Phoenix to visit Phil's sister Anne and her family, trips to California with family friends, and a trip to Israel in 1976 where we met her mother's brother and his family, as well as a couple of trips to Hawaii. There was a return trip to Europe in 1984 when Miriam, my Aunt Doris, and I shared adventures in England, Scotland, Belgium, France, and the Netherlands. It was a lot of fun. In the mid-1980s, Miriam was persuaded to leave Garden City Collegiate and become the principal at Ramah Hebrew School. She enjoyed her wonderful staff, and again, some of them are here today. She liked telling stories about the cute things her young students said. When the school closed, she retired, but she was not one to stay idle, and soon she was called out of retirement to become a principal at Grey Academy. In the 1990s, Miriam and Phil sold their house on Arrowwood Drive, and they moved, temporarily they said, to an apartment on Wellington Crescent. That temporary move lasted for 25 years as they embraced living in the village. My mother became a regular walker and enjoyed exploring her neighborhood. The 1990s also brought some changes to the family with the addition of their son-in-law Howard, whom they embraced as a son, and the arrival of grandchildren Matthew, Ryan, and Michael. Miriam and Phil got together with us at least once a week. I have many memories of my mother reading to the boys, pulling them in their wagon, or kicking a ball down the hallway of the apartment building. Education remained important to Miriam, as within a month of Matthew's birth, she and Phil started a registered educational savings plan so that he would be able to attend university. They were extraordinarily generous to their grandchildren. Miriam had many interests. She remained an avid reader until her eyesight started to fail due to glaucoma. During the 70s and 80s, she and some Garden City colleagues purchased race horses, and we enjoyed attending at Assiniboia Downs to cheer them on. Miriam enjoyed the theater, and she and I attended many plays at the Manitoba Theater Center. In 2009, my family and I took her to experience a promenade-style Hamlet at Shakespeare in the Ruins. Miriam enjoyed reasonably good health for most of her life, but she had 2 bouts with cancer, the first in 1975 and the second in 2016. The latter required extensive surgery to her mouth, which created numerous difficulties for her. In 2016, just after her surgery, Miriam and Phil moved to River Ridge Retirement Residence, where Miriam enjoyed her calming view of the Red River. Phil's declining health required him to move to the Simpkin Center in 2018, and it was not easy for my mother, who was beginning to suffer from dementia, to live on her own. As someone who took pride in her intellect, losing her memory and her ability to reason was the worst possible outcome. The pandemic forced Miriam to become even more isolated, and her last few years were a tremendous struggle. As I was cleaning out her apartment at River Ridge, I came across a letter which was sent to the residents by the River Ridge management. By then my mother's dementia was advanced, but she had taken a pen and corrected all the grammatical errors and improved on the sentence structure. And that was the Miriam I remember. Miriam spent her last year at the Simpkin Center, where she passed in her sleep on May the 14th. She had a few moments of clarity over the past year, but mostly resided in memories of the past. Some of these were happy ones, such as her belief that she, ever the teacher, was at a boarding school, or her belief that she, ever a horse racing aficionado, was at the racetrack. Many thanks to the staff at the Simpkin Center for their competent and compassionate care. We are not a large family, and we develop bonds with some extended family for which I am forever grateful. We were particularly close with my Uncle Shim, that was my mother's uncle, and his wife, Doris Kirsch, and with my father's cousins, Jean and Max Reuter. We shared many Seders and Rosh Hashanah meals with them, and my mother was devastated to lose each of them. As the rabbis mentioned, my mother is survived by her husband, my family, her sister-in-law, Anne, her niece and nephew who reside in Arizona, She was also close with her cousin Rita Schreiber, and although she did not get to see them often, she treasured her extended family elsewhere in Canada and in the United States. When called upon to speak in public, my mother always used a literary quote. I can think of nothing more appropriate at this moment than something her grade 12 students will recall from Hamlet. May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I also want to thank you and Howard for the conversation we had the other day about your mom. My goal is not to repeat too many of the things that you said, and I'll keep it brief. But I loved what you said to me the other day, Sharon. You said, my mom was not the typical mom of the day. She always worked. She was someone dedicated to her craft. She was a voracious reader. She enjoyed challenges and crossword puzzles, and she had friends who were intellectually minded. And once she retired, she started playing bridge, and she and Phil were able to travel together. As you have said, she was also a doting grandmother, and she really, really enjoyed being with her grandsons. I thought it was especially cute, Sharon, cute I hope is the right word, that you let me know that your mom was not fond of driving. And eventually, Matthew became old enough, and he became not her chauffeur, but her driver, and he did that for his grandparents on a regular basis. The thing I want everyone to remember about Miriam, and I should take a step back and tell you, I didn't have the pleasure of knowing Miriam that well. I certainly had opportunities to speak to her when I first arrived, and we spoke on the phone, and she always was very kind and very respectful. And when I reminded her of who I was in terms of my family, she said, you don't need to tell me. I know that. But the thing that I always will remember, and these are from days when I was a young adult, a teenager, everyone knew about Miriam Maltz as a force. And you knew the thing people said about her is that she could be tough, but she had high expectations of her students, and she strove for excellence, and she encouraged others to be in that same modality of pursuing excellence. And as a result, she commanded a lot of respect. I know that Miriam, maybe like my mom and other people's mothers and fathers, was details matter to her. Is that an exaggeration? And I've been thinking lately, as someone who's not always so focused on details, but is more of a visionary, that maybe it's in the details that we're able to create a makom kadosh, sacred space. Maybe the small steps and ingredients that go into a particular situation, especially as an educator, maybe all of those things matter so that our students, all of us, become aware of the magnitude of the space that we're holding and the space that we're in. So my goal is to be more like Miriam that way. I also want to say I've known this gentleman for a long time. But I want to offer that, Howard, you are an incredible son-in-law. And I think it was Sharon who shared that you weren't so much a son-in-law as you were a son. And you shared with me that your in-laws and your parents became good friends. They weren't in each other's social networks before you and Sharon got together, but somehow they managed and they pursued a relationship. And it wasn't just on the chagim, on the holidays, but you did everything together. Birthday dinners, kids' birthday parties, Father's Day, Mother's Day. And you told me how blessed you were. So here I want to stop because I think Miriam is maybe telling us something, or telling me it's enough. But I want to just bring some Torah into to this ceremony, to this ritual, because I think Miriam was someone who was steeped in Jewish knowledge and Jewish experience. Yiddishkeit was really important for her. You don't become the principal of a Jewish day school if Yiddishkeit isn't important to you, right? So the Hebrew term kashma kenhu means a person is like their name. Kashma kenhi, a name is a reflection of that individual. And we know that not just from biblical names, but in all Hebrew names. And so the Talmud tells us that the Miriam of the Torah, the sister of Aaron and Moses, but she was more than that, Miriam HaNiviyah, the prophetess. The Talmud names her as one of the 7 major female prophets of Israel. And Torah describes her alongside of Moshe and Aaron as delivering the Israelites from bondage in Egypt. And there are several meanings behind the name Miriam. I'm not going to go through all of them now. But Miriam, Mem, Resh, Yud, Mem, spelling the word Merim, means to elevate. It connotes the fact that Miriam, from whom King David issued, was elevated to the house, the Davidic dynasty that is destined to elevate the Jewish people and the perfected community of humanity to redemption and to the world to come. And this might be consistent with an idea which, although not found in Jewish sources, is based on the suggestion that Miri in ancient Egyptian means beloved. So we thank God for all the blessings which you, Adonai, have bestowed upon us in the form of Miriam bat Reuven bepesi. Tehei nafsha tzura b'tzora chaim. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. Before we continue with the remaining rituals that are connected to a Jewish funeral, I just want to make a few announcements. The first is for those who are considering making a donation, and I think we all should feel obligated to do so, but there are a couple of options. One is the scholarship fund at the Seven Oaks Foundation for Excellence in English Studies at Garden City, and the other is the Philip and Miriam Maltz Fund at the Jewish Foundation of Manitoba. I also want to let folks know that Shiva will take place at Sharon and Howard's home at 64 Ambassador Road on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings. Shiva visits are welcome from 7 to 9, and davening service will take place at 7:15 on all of those evenings. As mentioned, we're going to participate in an important part of the ritual. These rituals are known as a Hasid shel emet, the purest form of kindness that we can bestow on someone whose life existed to help lift up others.
I'm going to ask everyone to be very careful when they make their way over. The ground is quite wet and very muddy. If we take this shovel, which we ordinarily use for gardening or other purposes, we hold it upside down, and we say to God that it's a way to let God know we're disappointed with God's choice of taking the loved one. However, we acquiesce by placing the earth on top of the cactus. I'll encourage you, we're still living through a pandemic. So I'm going to ask you to just, all of us want to zealously pay tribute to the earth, but if you could kindly remember that we're still in the pandemic. We're doing it just 3 times for now, and if you'd like to, at the end of the service, if you'd like to place additional earth on the cactus. And we're very careful about placing the shovel back so that the next person can enter into this sacred space and participate in the stuff. So I'll ask Andy to come forward, and then anyone else who'd like. There are multiple shovels, so you can use those at the same time.
Folks, I'm going to suggest that we have the next 3 people place earth on the casket. We'll pause to recite the Al-Malei Rachamim and then conclude with the Mourner's Kaddish. And then that'll end the service. But for those of you who'd like to come back and place additional earth on the casket, you're free to do so. Oh, no, go ahead. So I'd like to bring everybody's attention back. You know, I was just thinking, some of you know I'm the child of 2 educators, 2 Jewish educators, and I just want to reiterate the point I tried to make earlier. It's true for all educators, but the work you do as an educator is not done so you can receive praise over and over again. The work you do is often behind the scenes, and it will never be fully appreciated by the people you serve. And so I can tell you, as the child of educators, the times my parents had to sacrifice time to be with other people's children, not that I resented that, but they did so because it was a passion of theirs. And the things they did people will never fully know the extent of those offerings. And I have to imagine it was true for your mom, Sharon. So I have a request on behalf of your children. Can all of you, not now, but at some point, can you tell them how special their grandmother was and what she did for each one of you and how she impacted your lives? They should know the power of who Miriam was and how far her reach extended. So at this time, I'm going to recite the Al-Malei Rachamim prayer, and again, that will be followed by the Mourner's Kaddish. Al-Malei Rachamim Eshocheim Bamromim Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Shechina B'malot Kedoshim Uzorim Kezorat Kiyam Mazirim Et Nishmat Miriam Baruvim V'Pesi Shalcha Le'olama B'Gan Eden Tehei Menuchata Anna Balarachamim Hastireha B'Setek Nafecha Le'olamim Utzror B'Tzor HaChaim Et Nishmata Adonai Hu Nachlata V'Tanuach Al Mishkava V'Nomar Amen. Mourner's Kaddish. Yeah, you can say it there. Here.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabah ve'amad yivra haruta v'yimlich malchutei b'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayei dechol be'Yisrael ba'agala u'bizman kariv v'yimru amen. Yehi shmei Rabah mebarach l'olam u'mei amaya. Yibarach v'yishtabach v'yitkorar v'yikraman v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalel v'yitalel shmei dekudah shabri v'chutz v'yinkol berchata v'shirata Tishbachata v'nechamata, damiran be'omav v'yimru amen. Yehei shalom Rabah min Shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yamru amen. Aseh shalom b'mromav, huya aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yamru amen.
The last thing I'd like to say to you, Sharon, and to the whole family, and to all of us, really, we say these words of comfort to you. Hamakom yinachem etchem b'toch shar avlei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May God continue to grant you comfort amongst all the mourners of Zion, Jerusalem, and Alad throughout the entire world. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. You're aware of the Shiva times, and we appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.